Hello there everybody, Martin here from Affinity for Commander. Today we have two very special guests to the channel, Wally and Christian from Chad Magic. I'd like to give a massive thank you to these chaps for taking the time to play some games with us. We had a wonderful time with you both. But without further ado, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Edgar Markov Vampire Typal deck and keep an opening hand consisting of Arcane Signet, Dark Imposter, Elender the Dusk Rose, Blood Crypt, Godless Shrine, a Swamp and a Mountain.
I am playing my Urza Lord Protector Artifacts deck, keeping a starting hand of Darksteel Mutation, Mind Stone, Rhystic Study, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, Flooded Strand, Glacial Fortress, and an Island.
Christian is playing his Yorion the Sky Nomad Flicker deck and keeps a hand containing Tribute Mage, Teferi Time Raveler, Displacer Kitten, Azorius Guildgate, Flooded Strand, a Plains, and an Island.
And finally, Wally is playing his Obuun Moldiah Ancestor Landfall deck. He keeps an opening hand made of Sylvan Library, Tuskguard Captain, Tragic Arrogance, Multani Yevamiah's Avatar, Firelath World Sculptor, Terramorphic Expanse, and a Plains.
I win the die roll and play a tapped Godless Shrine before passing to Christian.
Christian plays Azorius Guildgate and passes.
Alex plays Flooded Strand and pays 1 life to sacrifice it. He searches his library for Prairie Stream, puts the land into play tapped, and ends his turn.
In his turn, Wally plays Terramorphic Expanse, immediately sacrificing the land to put a forest into play tapped. With no further actions, he passes to Martin.
I begin my turn by playing Fetid Heath and tap out to cast Arcane Signet.
The best kind of Signet.
Happy with my mana rock, I pass the turn.
Christian plays a Flooded Strand of his own and pays a single life to sacrifice it. He puts a Hallowed Fountain onto the battlefield tapped in this way and ends his turn.
Alex starts his turn by playing Glacial Fortress and then casts Sapphire Medallion. With nothing more to do, he passes to Wally.
Wally plays a mountain and casts a very fancy Sylvan Library before passing.
The amount of fire in that tree gives me such anxiety. In my turn, I cast Marvren Fane, Dusk Apostle, triggering my commander's Eminence ability. I create a 1/1 vampire token in this way, and play a tapped Blood Crypt before ending my turn.
Christian plays an island and taps all of his lands to cast Tribute Mage. He searches his library for Mycosynth Wellspring, puts the artifact into his hand, and passes to me.
Alex begins his turn by playing a Plains and casts Mind Stone. Next he casts Rhystic Study, causing the rest of the table to sigh deeply, and passes.
To pay the 1 for that sigh. Wally draws 3 cards thanks to Sylvan Library, and in an absolutely Chad move, pays 8 life to keep them all.
What a mad lad!
Next he casts Lotus Cobra, and with him unable to pay the 1 extra for Rhystic Study, I draw a card. Not yet finished, Wally plays Gruul Guildgate as his land for turn, producing a green mana with his Snake's Landfall ability before ending his turn.
I play a Swamp and cast Elender the Dusk Rose. I use my Arcane Signet to pay the Rhystic Study tax,
Rude.
and create another vampire token thanks to Daddy Edgar's ability. Moving to combat, I attack Alex with Marvren and the vampire that doesn't have Summoning Sickness, and the Apostle's ability then triggers. I create a 1/1 vampire with lifelink, and unable to block my Bloodsuckers, Alex takes 3. Pleased with my position in the game, I pass to Christian.
In his turn, Christian plays a Plains and casts Smothering Tithe.
Boo!
I draw a card from my study and Christian passes the turn.
Alex draws and chooses not to pay the Smothering Tithe tax. As a result, Christian creates a treasure token and Alex plays a Plains as his land for turn. Next he casts his commander, Urza Lord Protector, lowering the cost of his blue artifacts, instants and sorcery spells by 2 mana in total.
Value.
Not yet finished, Alex uses his remaining mana to cast Solemn Simulacrum, lovingly referred to as Chad Robot by our esteemed guests.
Must be a little Pudlian thing.
He searches his library for an island, puts it into play tapped, and ends his turn.
Wally draws 3 cards from his Sylvan Library, and Christian's Smothering Tithe triggers 3 times.
That's going to get out of hand very quickly.
Wally chooses not to pay for any of these, creating Christian 3 treasures, and puts 2 of the cards he just drew back on the top of his library. Next he taps all of his lands to float 3 mana, and plays Boros Garrison. Wally returns his forest to his hand with the land's ETB and generates a white mana with Lotus Cobra. He then uses all of his floating mana to cast his commander, Obuun Moldaya Ancestor, and I draw from my study. This allows Christian to create another treasure, demonstrating an interaction that I am definitely not okay with. Wally then discards down to 7 before passing to Martin.
I draw, letting Christian create a treasure, and cast Go for the Throat. I target Urza in this way, deciding not to pay the Ristic Study tax, and Alex chooses to draw. He decides not to pay the Smothering Tithe tax, allowing Christian to create a treasure, and Urza is then destroyed.
What have I done to deserve such hate?
I put a +1/+1 counter on a lender when the Lord Protector dies, and play a mountain as my land for turn. Not yet finished killing creatures, I cast Terminate, this time paying the 1. I destroy Tribute Mage of my spell, putting a +1/+1 counter on a lender when the wizard dies, and then move to combat. Here I attack Alex with a lender and Christian with the rest of my Bloodsuckers. Mavrin Fane's ability triggers, creating a lifelinky vampire, and neither defending player declares any blocks. Alex takes 3, Christian takes 5, and I gain 4 life due to my lifelinkers. Still feeling in a strong position, I pass the turn.
In his turn, Christian plays an island and casts Panharmonicon.
Ew.
He chooses not to pay for the Ristic Study trigger, and I decide not to draw a card, given this would give Christian another treasure token. Not yet finished, Christian casts Elsewhere Flask, and I elect not to draw from my study trigger. Christian draws 2 cards thanks to the combined effect of his Flask and Panharmonicon, and then uses 4 more of his treasure to cast Solemn Simulacrum. I once again choose not to draw, and Christian puts 2 planes into play tapped with his Sad Robot's doubled ETB triggers. Still not finished, he uses his remaining treasures to cast Mycosynth Wellspring, and for the 4th time this turn, I choose not to draw from my enchantment.
Not all heroes wear capes.
Christian searches the library for an island and a plains, puts both lands into his hand, and passes to me.
Alex begins his turn by paying 2 mana to Smothering Tithe, and plays a Darker Waste as his land for turn. Next, he asks Wally if he has any way of dealing with Christians in my board states, to which Wally replies with,
Yeah, I have actually. I might do it next turn.
Satisfied with this information, Alex passes the turn.
Wally draws 3 cards, generating Christian 3 treasures, and puts 2 of these cards back on top of his library. He then plays a plains, generating a white mana with Lotus Cobra, and putting a +1/+1 counter on Obuun with their own ability. Next, Wally uses 3 mana to cast Hour of Revelation, paying an additional mana for Ristic Study. With Hour of Revelation still in the stack, Christian responds by casting Ghostly Flicker. He elects not to pay for Ristic Study, and I draw a card as a result. This in turn triggers Mana Tithe, creating Christian a treasure, and Christian flickers Solemn Simulacrum and Elsewhere Flask with his spell.
Get ready for more value!
Christian searches his library for 2 islands, putting them into play tapped, and draws 2 cards from his flask. Wally's board wipe then resolves, destroying all non-land permanents in play. Both Solemn Simulacrum's abilities trigger, drawing Christian and myself a card, and Martin creates 3 1/1 vampires with lifelink thanks to a lender. Very happy with the devastation he has caused, Wally ends his turn.
I start my turn by playing Sacred Foundry, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. Next I tap out to cast my commander, Edgar Markov, and warn Alex not to counter him if he wants Christians to take a bunch of damage.
I find these conditions acceptable.
Moving to combat, I attack Christian with all 4 of my vampires, triggering Mr. Markov's ability. I put a +1/+1 counter on each of my guys, and Christian takes 11 damage. I gain 6 life thanks to my token vampire's lifelink, and with nothing more to do, pass to Christian.
Christian plays a plains and casts Teferi Time Raveler. Next he casts Agent of Treachery, stealing Edgar Markov from Martin, and activates his Planeswalker's -3 ability. Christian returns 1 of Martin's tokens to his hand, causing it to fade into the ether, and draws a card. Pleased with how his revenge has panned out, he passes the turn.
In his turn, Alex plays Mishra's Foundry, and then casts Thram, Senior Edificer. Next he casts the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, drawing a card thanks to his dwarf. Alex chooses to give Edgar -5/5 of the artifact's ETB, and the Vampire Aristocrat is destroyed.
If I'm going to lose to Edgar Markov, you can rest assured it won't be the hands of a blue-white control player.
Out of mana, Alex discards down to 7 and ends his turn.
Wally begins his turn by playing a forest, and recasts his commander before passing to Martin.
I play Isolated Chapel and cast Dark Imposter. I create a 1/1 vampire when I cast him, and move into combat I attack the fairy with both of my 2/2 white vampire tokens. Christian blocks one of the attackers with his agent, resulting in the Bloodsucker's death, and I gain 4 life. More importantly, Teferi's loyalty is reduced to 0, sending him to the graveyard, and I pass the turn.
Christian begins his turn by casting Seagate Restoration, drawing 8 cards, and removing the need to discard down to 7 in his cleanup step.
That's a lot of card draw for one spell.
Next he plays an island, and taps his remaining lands to cast Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Christian has the rogue enter as a copy of his Agent of Treachery, gaining control of my Mightstone and Weakstone with the newly acquired ETB.
Ouch, you won't be transforming your commander anytime soon then?
Still not done, Christian taps my mana rock in order to cast Soul Ring, and then uses floating mana and the ring to cast Scroll of Fate. Happy with his plays, Christian ends his turn.
Alex plays Seat of the Synod and exiles 5 cards from his graveyard in order to cast Dig Through Time. He looks at the top 7 cards of his library, putting 2 of them into his hand and the rest on the bottom of his library. Next, Alex casts the Supreme Verdict as he just found, destroying all of the creatures in play for the 2nd time this game, and passes to Wally.
In his turn, Wally plays Cryptic Caves and casts Kodama's Reach. He searches his library for a forest and a mountain, putting the former into play tapped and the latter into his hand before passing. In response to this, Martin casts Wear, targeting Scroll of Fate. Christian responds to this by activating his scroll, manifesting a card in his hand. The artifact is then destroyed, and Martin proceeds to his turn.
I start my turn by casting Markov Baron, creating him a little vampire friend as I do so.
Ooh, friends!
Unable to do anything else, I end my turn.
Christian begins his turn by playing an untapped Mystic Sanctuary, returning the Seagate Restoration in his graveyard to the top of his library with the land's ETB.
Oh no.
Next, he taps my Mightstone and Weakstone to cast Golden Egg, drawing the Restoration with the artifact's ability, and casts it. This time, Christian draws 10 cards, which I'm sure you'll agree is absolutely ridiculous, and uses his remaining mana to cast Approach of the Second Sun. He puts the cards 7th from the top of his library, gains 7 life, and with the win condition in his future, passes to me.
Alex casts Aetherflux Reservoir, closely followed by Archaeomancer's Map. He gains 2 life thanks to his reservoir and searches his library for 2 basic planes. Alex puts both of these lands into his hand, plays one as his land for turn, and passes. In response to this, Wally casts Crush Contraband, exiling the Mightstone and the Weakstone before moving to his turn.
In his turn, Wally plays a mountain and casts his commander for a 3rd time. Next, he casts a very pretty Collective Voyage, adding 0 mana to the spell himself. However, Martin quickly figures out the method in Wally's madness, adding 4 mana to the spell's ability. This forces each of us to search our library for 4 basic lands and put them into play tapped before shuffling our libraries.
Farewell Approach of the Second Sun!
I put a plains into play from my hand thanks to the Archaeomancer's Map, and Wally puts 4 +1/+1 counters on Obuun thanks to their landfall ability. Having saved our booties from certain doom once more, Wally ends his turn.
I recast my commander and then move to combat. Here I attack Christian with all of my creatures, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of them with Edgar's ability. Christian blocks Eddie with his manifest, revealing it to be Charming Prince, and takes 6 damage. I gain 3 life from my Markov Baron, and with 3 mana remaining, I pass to Christian.
Christian starts his turn by casting Mystical Tutor, putting Approach of the Second Sun on the top of his library in this way. Next, he casts Omen of the Sea, scrying 2, and drawing the approach that he chose not to scry away.
Weird that.
Christian then casts the aforementioned Approach of the Second Sun, which, given that it's been cast before, wins him the game.
Well, that is it for another game. I hope that you enjoyed watching this YouTuber crossover episode. I'd like to once again give a huge thank you to Christian and Wally for joining us for today's video. Be sure to check out their channel for awesome gameplay videos, including one where Alex and myself feature. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to each and every one of our incredible patrons, without whom we'd be unable to continue making content such as this. Additionally, be sure to check out our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you anything extra to do so, but it really helps the channel out. And finally, don't forget that you can help to support us in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. That's it for now though, we'll see you next time, stay awesome.